Got 100 steps to go. Tonight I'll make it 99 by rayrae118. Chapter 8. Breakfast was a somewhat quiet affair the next morning. Everyone was tired, having to get used to waking up early after several months of freedom. Minerva handed out schedules as usual, passing Harry his with a small smile before moving down the table. Harry looked over his schedule, making a note of what books he would need for the day. Schedule for Harry James Potter. Monday, Potions, Defense Against the Dark Arts. Tuesday, Ancient Runes, Charms. Wednesday, Arithmancy, Transfiguration, Potions. Thursday, Ancient Runes, Defense Against the Dark Arts, Charms. Friday, Transfiguration, Arithmancy.
I've just realised something,
said Ron, suddenly as he looked up from studying his schedule. What is it? Asked Neville, looking at the redhead. Ron glanced up at the head table.
There's no new professor this year. Dumbledore didn't make any announcements, and I don't see anyone new. Do you know what this means?
Harry looked up at the table as well, surprised.
Wow, he commented, slightly impressed. The same teacher for more than a year. Maybe the curse is broken.
Or maybe there was no curse at all, but it just got a bad reputation after having so many professors leave after just a year, Hermione retorted. There's no proof of any curse on the position. Harry shrugged and turned back to his meal. It was nice that they wouldn't have to adjust to yet another defense professor. Snape had done a good job last year, and he was glad that the snarky man would continue the role. After everyone had finished eating, they all hurried back up to Gryffindor Tower to grab their books for the day, before making their way to the potions classroom. Harry went through the first week. He was reminded greatly of the beginning of his 5th year. Every professor started their class by talking about the NEWTs at the end of the year. They stressed the importance of studying and using their last year to decide what they wanted to do once they graduated. By the end of the week, Harry knew, without a doubt, how important it was to do well on those tests. Not that he had questioned the fact before. He had been impressed with Ginny's restraint. She had waited until the second night back before she decided to spend the night in Harry's room. Fortunately, he had been prepared, and had cast silencing spells to ensure no one interrupted or overheard. From that day on, Ginny spent most nights with Harry, after making only short appearances in her dorm room, to be sure her dormmates didn't start talking. They wouldn't comment on her not being in the room in the mornings, because she had been waking up early to exercise every morning for the last few years. She knew they were risking it, but now that they had completed the bond, she wanted to spend as much time with Harry as possible. Plus, the sex was amazing. Ginny blushed as she thought that last thought, and Hermione, who had glanced up briefly, taking a short break from the charms essay she had been writing, frowned. Is everything all right, Ginny? She asked, concerned. Ginny started, and immediately nodded, trying not to blush any further. Fine, Hermione. Hermione's frown deepened slightly, but she turned back to her essay, and Harry, sitting next to Ginny, glanced over and winked, amused. She gave him a mental growl and shoved him lightly. Ron groaned as he tossed his quill down.
Only a week in, and I already can't wait until the holiday, he grumbled. My wrist hurts.
Harry made a sympathetic sound while Neville nodded in agreement. Hermione rolled her eyes but set down her quill as well. Perhaps a break is in order, she admitted. Ron's eyes lit up, and he immediately grabbed Hermione and proceeded to pull her out of the common room. If Harry had to hazard a guess, the two were headed to find a nearby broom cupboard. Neville shrugged and packed his things away. I could use some fresh air, he said. You guys interested? Harry glanced at Ginny and then shook his head.
Another time, Nev. I think we're going to go for a walk.
Neville nodded. Have fun. I'll see you guys at dinner. Harry and Ginny smiled and then headed out of the common room, hands entwined. They had no real destination in mind, but were content to just wander, talking through their bond. Ever since they had completed it, their feelings just seemed to have gotten that much deeper. Both had noticed an increase in power, and Harry, who had always been somewhat sensitive to magical energies, could almost feel the power around him. It resonated in his very bones. It had taken a while to get used to it, but after a while, the constant hum was comforting. Ginny was amazed at the magical power all around her, that she had never really noticed before. She knew most of it she was sensing through Harry, but she could feel it all the same. It was as they were walking back to the common room that it happened. On the 7th floor, they were passing the blank stretch of wall that hid the room of requirement, when all of a sudden a door materialized. Harry and Ginny stopped, staring at the door in confusion. Harry frowned.
That's the room of requirement, but you need to walk by 3 times for the door to appear.
Ginny furrowed her brow. Do you think we should check it out? Harry was about to reply when the background hum he could constantly feel increased slightly before going back down. He looked at Ginny.
I think Hogwarts wants us to go in.
Ginny nodded and pushed open the door. Inside, they were a little underwhelmed to find nothing more than a bare stone room, with what looked to be a basin in the centre. They walked forward, cautiously, peering into the basin. Now Harry was even more confused. Why did Hogwarts want them to find this room, when the only thing in it was a basin filled with glowing coals? What? Ginny asked, but was unable to complete her thought, as she felt an answer come to her. Suddenly she knew what Harry meant when he had said the castle was speaking to him. Welcome, children, to the life, the soul, the heart. Harry glanced around the room.
What do you mean?
He asked cautiously, unsure if it would work. It was the first time he had really tried to hold an actual conversation with the castle. He felt a sort of mental smile in response, similar to the expressions he and Ginny sent each other, except this didn't come from Ginny. All the magic around you ties back here. Only those who are worthy can find this room. Being an heir isn't enough. You must have a pure mind and a pure heart. Harry nodded slowly. Ginny frowned slightly. Why can I hear this? She asked curiously. I'm not an heir. Hogwarts' mental voice sounded amused now. But you are one soul. Your bond is complete, and you are no longer 2 separate entities. You are one, children, forever and all eternity. Though Harry knew that Ginny was it for him, it was still rather shocking to hear it put in those words. They left the room soon after, still thinking about what they had learned.
You can probably communicate with Hogwarts now, because we completed the bond,
Harry said as they entered the common room. Ginny nodded. It makes sense. I still can't believe there's a room here that's the heart of the castle. Harry definitely shared her amazement, but they left off the conversation as their friends met them at that moment, and they headed down to get some dinner. The next week passed by quietly, with most of the excitement being Quidditch tryouts, which would be held by all 4 houses over the next 2 weekends. Harry and his friends met next weekend to talk more about their Horcrux search, though they still didn't have many more ideas than they had over the summer. Harry felt like they were stalled until they could find the Gaunt Shack. He knew there was a chance that they were doing all this searching for nothing, but some instinct in his gut told him that there was something to the idea, and he knew he wouldn't be able to let it go until they found the shack and searched it. Neville brought forth a few ideas, but it would be a while before they could actually test them out. The next weekend saw more than half of Gryffindor out on the Quidditch pitch, shortly after breakfast. Even though they only had 1 free spot on the starting team, Ron had decided to follow Harry's lead and hold full tryouts, to ensure they truly had the best team on the field. The lanky redhead was nervous as he stood in front of the group of students, but swallowed hard and started the tryouts, separating everyone by position and sending the chasers up into the air. When the tryouts were finished, Ron motioned for Harry to stay back, as the rest headed inside for lunch.
What did you think?
He asked while they were alone. Harry shrugged slightly. You're the captain, Ron. It's up to you. Ron glared at him, but there was no real heed to it.
This is new to me, Harry. I'm asking your opinion.
Harry bit his lip. and considered as they headed back up to the castle.
I think our starters and reserves from last year were pretty solid, he said. As far as a third chaser goes...
He paused and thought back to the morning.
I think Sheila showed the most promise. She's small and speedy, and she's got a wicked arm.
Ron nodded in agreement.
That's what I was thinking. What did you think about that third year? Ewan? He was pretty good on a broom.
Harry nodded thoughtfully.
He showed some talent. Not as good as Ginny, of course.
Ron snorted.
I don't think anyone here is, he repeated. Not... especially not when she's on a firebolt.
Harry smiled.
She is pretty awesome.
Ron rolled his eyes as they passed through the large doors to the entrance hall and headed for the Great Hall.
Please don't go all lovey-dovey, Harry. That's my sister.
Harry glanced at him sidelong.
Yeah, but you're my best mate. If I can't talk about my girlfriend with you, who can I talk about her with? Neville. Ron deadpanned. I really don't want to hear about you and my sister, no matter how happy I am that you two are together.
Harry shrugged but didn't reply as they sat down and pulled platters of sandwiches closer. Ron put up the team roster that night, so that people would know the results before they went to sleep. Starters: Chaser, Ginny Weasley. Chaser, Demelza Robbins. Chaser, Sheila Walters. Beater, Dean Thomas. Beater, Colin Creevey. Seeker, Harry Potter. Keeper, Ron Weasley, Captain. Reserves: Chaser, Vicky Frobisher. Chaser, Natalie MacDonald. Chaser, Ewan Abercrombie. Beater, Seamus Finnegan. Beater, Joffrey Hooper. Seeker, Dennis Creevey. Keeper, Evan Harrison. Sheila was ecstatic to make the starting team for the year and couldn't stop bouncing around, beaming from ear to ear. Her friend Evan just rolled his eyes, amused, until Ron told him he would work with him throughout the year to make sure he could take over the starting position after Ron left. At that point, Ewan was nearly as hyper as Sheila. Ron let the team celebrate for a few more minutes before he stood up.
Oi!
Everyone turned to look at him.
Congratulations, everyone who made the team. Practice starts tomorrow afternoon. Don't be late.
Harry rolled his eyes slightly, but knew that Ron was serious about his position. He was a bit Quidditch obsessed at times, but he was also a good player and a great strategist. Harry firmly believed Ron would make an excellent captain. The term quickly picked up, with the professors piling on the homework for the 7th years, while Ginny and Luna were nearly as swamped with their classes as well. Both had decided to stick with arithmancy and ancient runes, while dropping history of magic and astronomy. Luna was also taking care of magical creatures. They were so busy that they hadn't managed to do much research on the Horcruxes in a while, much less meet to discuss any findings. Harry and Ginny did manage to find some time to visit the room they had just decided to call the Heart, which they discovered was the only place they could actually communicate with the castle in the physical sense. Harry had been able to pose questions and get answers before, but he had never actually heard words other than in that room. Outside of the Heart, any responses were more feelings he received that led to certain answers. With all the work, classes, prefect, head boy and girl duties, and Quidditch, Halloween was upon them before they realised it. As had become tradition for them, Harry and Ginny skipped the feast in the Great Hall and had a private date in the Room of Requirement. They celebrated their anniversary this year over a dinner of roasted lamb, mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables, with chocolate cake for dessert. Even though technically their anniversary was November the 1st, they figured it was easy to celebrate it on Halloween, since they only really got together just a few hours into November. Ginny gasped as she opened the velvet box Harry gave her. Inside was a gorgeous sapphire and diamond necklace. "Oh, Harry, this is beautiful!" Harry smiled and helped her put it on.
"It's a family heirloom," he explained, "according to the card in the case in my vault. It was a wedding gift from my 2-times great-grandfather to his new wife."
Ginny nodded, fingering the necklace as she admired the way the light bounced off the diamond. It was amazing to her. Just a few years earlier, she never would have considered herself able to afford anything diamond. And now she had a jewellery box filled with more galleons than she had ever owned. Harry pulled out a second box.
This is something I should have given you a long time ago, but I figured it's time for you to have it.
He opened the box, and Ginny smiled at seeing the wedding band that completed her set. It was a rose gold band, encrusted with diamonds all the way around, in an infinity-style ring. Harry took her hand in his and put the ring on, sliding it up her finger. Ginny pulled her hand back and admired the look, until Harry distracted her once more. When she looked up, he was taking a second ring out. He glanced at her and smiled.
If I give you yours, it only makes sense to have mine as well.
Ginny took the ring from him, not even giving him a chance to put it on. After admiring it for a moment, it was rose and white gold, a solid band in 2 colours that crossed at the top, before she took his hand and slid the ring on. They stayed where they were for a moment longer, holding hands and just enjoying the moment. After a few minutes, Ginny smiled seductively. I got you a present as well, but you'll need to unwrap it. Harry grinned, understanding what she was saying.
I would love to,
he replied. Ginny nodded and pulled one shoulder of her dress down. Anyway, moving on. When Harry awoke the next morning, he had a brief moment of confusion before remembering that they had fallen asleep in the room of requirement after the night before. He turned to the side and smiled at the sight of Ginny lying there. Once more he wondered how he had gotten so lucky to have a woman like her interested in him. Ginny groaned as wakefulness filtered through her sleep-muddled mind. Someday, you're going to have to stop selling yourself short, Harry. She opened her eyes and looked at him. You're an amazing guy. Smart, kind, thoughtful, gorgeous. And that's not even getting into how amazing you are in bed. Ginny blushed, but did the same. I know the Dursleys did a horribly good job at convincing you that you were worthless. But you're not, Harry. You're worth so much more than you give yourself credit for. She leaned forward and kissed him. Besides, you aren't the only one who got lucky. I am. Harry raised an eyebrow, and she pulled away. Ginny glanced down and elaborated. I never considered myself beautiful or popular. I was always more of a tomboy. But then you came along. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, who could have had his pick of any girl he wanted. And you chose me. Harry grasped her hands tightly.
I'll always choose you, Gin. You are the most beautiful woman in the world to me. I never cared about popularity or fame. What I care about is you. You're perfect.
Ginny smiled and gave him another kiss. After a few more minutes of bliss, she pulled away and sighed. It's probably time for breakfast. If we're not there, people are going to ask why. Harry nodded regretfully and got up. Ginny followed his lead. They were surprised to see a change of clothes for each of them awaiting neatly folded next to the fireplace, before Harry shrugged and figured the house elves had seen to it, knowing that they would need clean uniforms. Both made sure to remove their wedding rings, and in Ginny's case, engagement ring, as well, before they left the room and headed towards the Great Hall. They received several looks from their friends when they joined the Gryffindor table for breakfast. Hermione, somewhat predictably, was the first one to speak. Where were you two last night? I checked with your dorm mates, Ginny, and they said you didn't return to your room. Harry and Ginny knew it was futile to try and hide it. After they glanced at each other just once, their blushes said it all. Ron frowned, trying hard not to fly off the handle. He knew that Ginny and Harry were soul-bonded, and technically married. He knew that they would be together until the end. But it was still his little sister and his best mate. He didn't want to think about their sex life. It was a startling insight to realise that his little sister was doing that. Hermione also looked less than pleased, but it was more because she didn't appreciate them staying out all night or engaging in those activities while still in school and while Ginny was underage. Perhaps it was also because No, she stopped herself suddenly in the middle of the thought. They were married. They weren't doing anything wrong, other than maybe staying out all night. Because Ginny was emancipated, due to their soul bond. Harry and Ginny were relieved that no one commented. Neville had no negative thoughts, knowing that they would be responsible, and it was their life and their relationship. So rather than an inquisition, as the couple had been expecting, the talk turned to the first Hogsmeade trip of the term, a couple of weeks away. They were all excited, and Hermione was thankful, as she needed some more parchment, while Neville could stand to update a few of his quills. Soon enough they left the table and returned to the common room to grab their schoolwork, before heading to the room of requirement to meet the rest of their friends and spend a day doing homework. Ron had an unhealthy green tinge to his face the Saturday following Halloween. It was the first Quidditch match of the year, Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw. Harry tried to get him to relax, but he knew that only a win could convince Ron that he had earned his position as captain. Gryffindor dominated, of course. With Harry and Ginny both on firebolts, the other team really had no chance. They destroyed Ravenclaw with a final score of 320 to 60. Ginny had been responsible for half of their goals, something she proudly lauded over anyone at the party that followed, though everyone knew she was just having fun and joking with them. Ron was bright red as he was greeted as a hero at the party, with people congratulating him and praising him. He had always considered himself known to everyone as Harry Potter's best friend. He had never really thought of himself as popular in his own right, more popular by association. But here he was, Quidditch captain, at least partially responsible for the complete landslide win they had just delivered. He wasn't just a sidekick. He had a grin a mile wide throughout the entire evening, and felt like, if needed, he could provide a Horcrux to drive away all the former Dementors of Azkaban. The group split up early on. The morning of the Hogsmeade trip, each couple wandered off to spend some time alone, before they agreed to meet up for lunch at the Three Broomsticks. Neville and Susan went off to meet Neville's parents, who had come to the village to see their son. They had to report for duty in the afternoon, but they would have the morning free. Harry and Ginny spent the morning wandering through the shops, before they made their way to the pub just before noon. A series of loud cracks interrupted them just before. Harry opened the door, acting on instinct, as he immediately dove to one side, knocking Ginny down. A couple of green jets sailed over his head, missing him by inches. If he hadn't moved when he would have been hit square in the chest. Harry and Ginny were immediately up and firing, turning to face the mass of figures robed in black with white masks. Death Eaters, Ginny grimly said mentally. Harry nodded, noting the back of his mind the way the students and townspeople were scrambling to defend themselves, not expecting the attack.
Damn it, we're going to need help,
Harry replied, observing the roughly 30 Death Eaters firing on the crowd. Most of the DA was in the village, and he could see several students providing opposition. Hannah and Terry were shooting off spells from their spot in the doorway of Zonko's. Colin and Dennis were watching each other's backs from their position in an alley between Scrivenshafts and the post office. Harry was about to start worrying on when his closest friends were, when the door opened behind them and Hermione and Ron came out, wands blazing. The foursome separated, Hermione and Ron to one side of the building, and Harry and Ginny to the other, each taking cover in the alleys, while still giving the Death Eaters a hard time.
Where are the others?
Harry called, hoping they were all right. Hermione didn't even spare a glance as she replied, "We were the first ones there. Neville said that he and Susan would be spending the morning with his parents away from the crowds, but Frank and Alice have most likely left for the ministry by now." Harry nodded grimly, turned his attention back to the fight. This group of Death Eaters were deadly talented. but they hadn't seemed to count on so much opposition. The DA had trained well, and used their skills to keep the Death Eaters at bay. Harry lost track of time as he ducked and dodged. He was unable to keep his position by the 3 broomsticks for long, and got pushed down the street as he defended himself and the younger students who were trying to find cover in the battle. Harry tried to direct any younger student to the nearest safe cover to get them out of the line of fire, but everywhere he looked spells were flying. His heart leapt into his throat when he saw a small body lying across one doorway, and several more bodies of varying ages in the streets. Harry was getting tired, but he knew he had to keep going. He ducked a purple spell, and then dodged a sickly yellow one. At one point it was Ron standing to his left, firing at a Death Eater who had been attempting to bring Zonkos down on Hannah and Terry. And then he moved on, and it was Hermione standing there, shielding him while he took out 2 Death Eaters firing spells at a group of 3rd years attempting to take cover in an alley next to Gladrags. Throughout it all, though, Ginny was a steady presence at his back, protecting him, and he her.
Where the hell is help?
Harry growled, firing a blasting hex at a wall behind 2 Death Eaters. He felt satisfaction at seeing the wall crumble and fall on top of Voldemort's supporters. Ginny shrugged, not pausing in her own casting. Out to lunch? She suggested. Harry rolled his eyes and concentrated on the fight. It felt like hours before they heard the crack that signified apparition. Harry was prepared to defend against the new threat, but relaxed slightly when he recognised several members of Dumbledore's Order, as well as a few Aurors, including Tonks, Frank and Alice, and returned to the problem at hand. A short time later, the Death Eaters had all port-keyed away. It appeared that they had linked port keys, because the ones who were unconscious disappeared as well. Harry lowered his wand slightly, but didn't completely let down his guard, just in case. It pleased him to see the rest of the students behaving similarly. Moody was at the front of the crowd, and nodded approvingly at the caution the students were displaying.
Good, Potter. Never let down your guard.
Harry tightened his grip on his wand.
What was the first spell Moody taught me in my class our 4th year?
Moody snorted.
Wouldn't know, would I? I was trapped in a trunk.
Harry nodded and relaxed a little more. Moody turned and started barking orders to the rest of the new arrivals, while Harry took stock of the students.
Blaze! Daphne!
He called out, relieved that the 2 were all right.
Get the injured organised.
He turned back to Moody.
I assume Dumbledore will be sending medical assistance? I have a feeling we're going to need it.
Moody pursed his lips, but nodded.
I'll see where we stand on that, he replied, turning away once more.
The attitude the former Auror displayed clearly told Harry that the headmaster had not thought that far. Blaze, Daphne and Luna started triaging the injured, getting those who were less hurt in a group, and organising other students to help stabilise those who were more seriously wounded. Harry looked around at the destruction in the village now, that there was nothing pressing that needed to be seen to. Buildings destroyed. Blood in the streets. It was madness. It was horrible. The students who weren't injured were calling out for friends or siblings, or helping seeing to the wounded. Townspeople had joined the fight, were doing much the same. Harry could see at least 5 bodies not moving at all, and his stomach lurched painfully, as he noted that 2 of them had to be school-aged, or younger. Ginny put her hand in his, and Harry looked down into her compassionate gaze. "Come on," she said softly. "There's still work to be done." Harry nodded mutely, and followed after her into the fray. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. I like the majority of that chapter, but that final battle was horrible. Those poor kids. I mean, these are children. They're not even 17 yet. Oh, my heart. Anyway, one thing I do really like about this chapter is Ron seeing his own self-worth. I related to Ron in some ways. I'm a younger sibling, not the youngest, but I'm in the middle, and it took me a long time to see my own worth, as I've said in how I relate to Mirabelle Madrigal. Same sort of thing. And realizing that you're not the sidekick in someone else's story, you're your own protagonist, is a wonderful feeling. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.